Hey everybody, Yankee here. I'm sure most of you have already heard by now, but a judge in Massachusetts, the state of Massachusetts, has refused to order an injunction against the assault weapons ban in the state of Massachusetts. And I say state of Massachusetts so many times here because I gotta admit, I always forget that Massachusetts is a state. Whenever I hear, oh, this has happened in Massachusetts, I always go, what state is Massachusetts in? Because like I said, forget it's a state. But it is one, and there's a big fight going on there right now about the Second Amendment. And this judge, who was asked to issue an injunction against the assault weapons ban there, declined to do so, stating that he believes the ban is okay as far as federal law is concerned and the Constitution is concerned. He says it's constitutional because the government has a history of banning unusual and dangerous weapons, and that the AR-15 falls into that class of weapons. And I want to talk about how weak that argument is here in a minute. But first off, I want to make a distinction here. Now, a lot of people are arguing that he's saying they're not in common use. No, he's not saying they're not in common use. Those are two different things according to the way the law is stated and previous rulings have been made. Remember, even Scalia said during Heller, well, of course we can ban people from M16s, because even though there's tons of them around, they commonly exist. They're dangerous and unusual, so citizens can't have it. Which is just a sign for you there. No matter how conservative and pro-gun you think a politician is or a justice is, they're really just serving the interest of the elite. So even when they make pro-gun rulings, they always leave a little out there. But like I was saying, this judge is not saying they're not in common use. They're probably the most common use gun around right now. He's saying that even though they're in common use, they are unusual and dangerous and therefore can be regulated. Now, they always say, ooh, throughout history, the founders even regulated dangerous and unusual weapons. But they never really give any examples. The one time they gave an example, they said trap guns. The founders regulated trap guns. Well, trap guns isn't really a weapon. Trap guns is how you use a weapon. When they were saying you couldn't do that, couldn't use trap guns, what they were saying is you can't set booby traps on public land that people just stray into and get shot. Because a trap gun is when you set up a firearm or an explosive device that goes off when you're not there through a tripwire or something else. Like if you want to catch a deer, but you don't want to sit out in the field and wait, you just set a gun up with a tripwire where they pass on their path. And then boom, you go out there and you find your dead deer after you hear the gun go off, and you got yourself some dinner. But unfortunately, other people hunting on those same lands could also walk through that trap. So the government says you can't do that. You can't set dangerous traps in public places. So they use that to say, oh, then we can ban AR-15s. Has nothing to do with each other. That's two totally separate things. So I would love to see the courts have to start saying what they're actually citing when they say that there's a history of doing this types of things, because the things they usually cite do not line up with what they're saying at all. But like I was saying, this guy is not saying, this Dennis something, what is his name? Let me look it up here real quick so I don't know. Dennis Saylor, who was a Bush appointee, a W appointee, by the way. So it's not some liberal Democrat. He said that this is okay to ban because it is dangerous and unusual, and he's justifying that by saying it's not necessary for self-defense. An AR-15 is not necessary for self-defense. Well, you know, that's true of most guns. Is a .44 Magnum necessary for self-defense? No, it isn't. Is 15 rounds of 9mm in a Beretta necessary for self-defense? Not usually. You're usually only going to use a couple rounds if you have to fire the gun at all. So that argument's pretty weak, saying it's not necessary for self-defense. And here's the thing, it is absolutely 100% necessary for self-defense if you look at the right circumstances. Now, if you're saying, an AR-15 is not necessary, when the town hoodlum comes around and tries to take your wallet, well, it wouldn't even be appropriate for that because you're probably not carrying around an AR-15. But when you're actually met with circumstances that the Second Amendment was written to deal with, like when a tyrannical government, rogue police forces, etc., that we would be fighting if we were fighting a tyrannical government, when they come to your house armed, an AR-15 would absolutely be necessary to have any chance of self-defense. Some type of high-capacity, semi-automatic rifle would be absolutely necessary, would actually be the minimum you would need, because they're going to have automatic weapons. You and I can't have those. So we're at a disadvantage anyway, but if 5 or 6 police officers show up on your doorstep because you spoke out against the government at a time when there's like martial law, etc., and they're deciding they're going to take you in and silence you, well, then that AR-15 becomes very essential. And that's just to have any chance whatsoever. That's not even putting you on even ground. That's just giving you some chance. So yeah, if you're, defending yourself against a street hoodlum who wants to take your wallet, AR-15 is neither appropriate, nor probably available, nor necessary. But when things really hit the fan, which the government was planning for with the Second Amendment, and you're fighting against a tyrannical government, things like AR-15s are extremely necessary. And then as far as the whole thing, they're so much more dangerous than other weapons. No, they're not. Anyone can cause equally as much damage with any type of rifle that has a detachable magazine, even if it's just a 5 or 10 round magazine. You can cause just as much damage. You can do more damage in a crowd with a shotgun, semi-auto shotgun. And reloading doesn't take long. It's not like this whole, that minute and a half it took them to reload. No, it's like a second, maybe a second and a half. And in that time, people aren't going to decide, look, he's reloading, now we can marshal some sort of defense. That's not very likely to happen in the rare occasions where people actually find themselves in those situations. So the guns aren't more dangerous than any other gun. People argue, but at a distance, this one guy in that window, shot at those people in that crowd. And if it hadn't been the fact that it was an AR-15, bullshit. He could have been just slapping in 10-round magazines one after another and done the same thing. Plus, he had multiple guns. All he'd had to do is have an accomplice reloading the guns, and he could just do it and just keep handing off. So these arguments are ridiculous. And as far as an AR-15 not being necessary, we all know it's in common use, and it's very useful for hunting, etc. So it's very useful for a lot of things, but when it comes to self-defense, they say, it's just not used for self-defense. So blah. And there's lots of cases of them being used for self-defense. Period. That's just reality. So if we have to start labeling all the times, like when the gentleman in that church shooting went and got his AR-15 and went and stopped the bad guy. If we have to start doing that in cases, they need to start doing that. But that shows you, too, the fact they don't do that, the people that are bringing the cases, they don't want to win completely, because then the NRA doesn't need to exist anymore, things like that. But that's a different topic. But like I was saying that the AR-15 isn't necessary for self-defense, that's taking a lot of gall, because you're completely ignoring what the Second Amendment is about. It's not about hunting. It's not about personal self-defense. All those things are a byproduct of the fact that we need to be armed in case we ever have to fight back against a tyrannical government. And when that happens, the AR-15 is more than necessary for self-defense. It's the least you should be able to have. And right now, even though it looks like, this might even end up being moot, the Massachusetts thing, because there's other states that I actually remember are states, like California, Illinois, stuff like that, have cases going on right now that will probably be settled first and make this case moot. But even right now, while we're winning all these victories and things look like they're going our way, now is when we need to fight harder than ever and pay more attention than ever. If you're in a state where one of these fights is going on, be involved, be part of the fight. If you're in a state where nothing's going on, find out a state where there is something going on, be involved in that one. Because we can't trust the politicians or the justices. Their whole goal right now is to create an elitist utopia where the 1% get to rule over the world and no one can fight them. They can't sleep easy if we can take back everything they have. And to take everything back, the 99% doesn't have to be equally armed to the 1%. They just got to be armed in a way that they can effectively fight back. And AR-15s would be a big part of that, to easily overcome the 1% and their little minions. And they know that. So they have to disarm us, or at least make us harmless to a point where we can't fight back. And they want to have as many of us as possible. That's why people like Bezos and stuff want more people. Even though it's destroying the world, they want more people because they want an elitist society where the 1% can roam the globe wherever they want to go, because it's a global economy, they're in charge, and there's masses of people. It's separated into two groups. One group that works, lives paycheck to paycheck, barely makes it. They have to do everything they can to survive and be semi-comfortable, but they can afford to buy the products that these people make. And then they want people below that are just the servants, who have no choice but to work in the factories, on the farms, etc. And none of them have a real ability to fight back. Even the class that, that buys their products, they don't want them to be comfortable enough that they could ever challenge them as far as production or anything like that. They don't want them making products and challenging them. And they definitely don't want them being able to fight back. That's the goal of politicians and justices, etc. That's the whole thing they're trying to do now. Build this world economy, and the first thing they have to do is disarm the population. And America is one of the key points, one of the key places they have to disarm people. So keep your eyes open. Like I said, be more involved than ever. Don't let traitors like Amy Coney Barrett stab us in the back while she thinks we're not looking. Make sure she knows we're looking. Like I said, right now, even though things look good and look promising, we can't trust any of these people. So be more involved than ever and fight harder than ever, because right now it's essential that we win.